Hi everyone! Today I'm going to be reviewing Alice in Wonderland, Disney's classic. So, the storyline for this is different than most animated movies, and it's going to be harder to talk about than pretty much any of the movies I previously done, because this one isn't about a three-act structure so much as Alice and the characters that she encounters and the situation she gets herself into, similarly to how I reviewed Totoro. It's a movie that really is about the adventures you can go on in this world of Wonderland. It doesn't have a set story, and it moves very briskly. Alice constantly going from one character to another, and they have their little spiel, and we find out who they are, and then she moves on to the next one, and so on and so forth. The real plot doesn't really start until around 50 minutes near the end when she's really trying to get home, and she's given up on the rabbit and had some character arc over how she no longer wants to give in to her curiosity and listen to her very good advice, and then her encounter with the Queen of Hearts and the game of croquet leading up to the climax. But even the climax is very unconventional, with all the characters she's encountered turning against her, and situations from the repeating, like the Mad Tea Party, the caucus race, and all the characters coming, and it's as if it's a large game to them. And even at times when they're chasing her, the Queen of Hearts herself seems to be interested in the race at the time, even though she's also bent on catching Alice. So it's a very unconventional story, but that's perfectly fine. Some movies are very much against the typical plot structure, and this is one of them, and this movie works to that works to this movie's advantage. And I really think that if any other movie tried to pull it off, it wouldn't quite work out, but with a good idea, a message about curiosity, and some creative characters, it really does work out. The animation for this movie is a bit more cartoonish than other Disney movies, which works because this is a more cartoonish Disney movie, period. Its storyline, its characters, its situations, the kind of creatures you see, all would be in a typical cartoon more than in a movie like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs or Bambi. And that really is appropriate for this movie. Alice's world is a lot more realistically animated, and Alice's features aren't comically exaggerated in any way, a large facial features, a big nose, or anything for that might be on the Mad Hatter or Queen of Hearts with a weird head shape or anything of the kind, a very large or small structure. Those are the kind of things that are on the Wonderland characters. Well, technically, the latter is for Alice once we get to the end, but that's another matter. And as such, she really does feel out of place in Wonderland. However, that isn't a nitpick with the animation or even a fault in the slightest, because that's really the point. The point is that she doesn't belong there. She isn't from around there, so it really works. And that was going to be the plan from the beginning when it was planned for being live action and animated crossover before it switched to being fully animated for, I believe, cost reasons. Don't quote me on that. And all the every scene in this movie is so much fun to look at. The creatures are also original, from the Cheshire Cat's baiting grin to some of the flowers in the Golden Afternoon segment, as well as the Tolji Wood scene with the mome raps, the bird in the bird cage that's actually a bird, the rocking horse fly, some of the cartoonish animation on characters like the White Rabbit and Dodo, certain choices that are made, like one brief black and white frame during the Mad Tea Party when the rabbit's watch is destroyed, as well as some scenes where it really gets crazy, such as the climax where Alice is chased through a giant teacup and then swirling puffs of smoke behind her as when all the characters are coming towards her. The animation for this film is fantastic. It's whimsical, cartoonish, over the top in the best way possible. Going on to the characters. Alice, some people say, is the least interesting character in the movie, and I can see that, but compared to Disney heroines of her time, I'd say she is one of the more well-rounded. Unlike the Disney princesses from around the same time, Alice does have some flaws, which make her a better character. She is curious to a fault, and she is a sweet child for the most time, but if you get on her bad side, you will realize she does have a temper, and she isn't afraid to tell you exactly what she thinks of you, as the Caterpillar and Queen of Hearts find out. I would say the hard way, but it usually backfires onto her in the long run. She makes mistakes, she's unsure, she gets frustrated, she breaks down and cries. It makes her a more relatable character than other Disney characters from this time, and she really transcends from the usual everyman into being a distinct character. Now on to the Wonderland characters. Oh boy, this is going to be one of my longest videos, I'm sure, because of these guys. There's so many of them. Starting off with one of my favorites, the Mad Hatter, who I've actually worn the costume for a couple of times. He is completely bonkers, and Edwin does a great job of voicing him. He is very friendly, but at the same time, he's completely unaware of what's going on around him. He's literal as possible. If you say the letter T around him, he'll automatically think of tea. Like when Alice tries to spell cat. And and then there was the March Hare, his partner for the comedic scenes, and these two are so completely mad, and they forget things seconds after they say it. They'll give you a riddle where it's moving like a writing desk, which some people say it's because Poe wrote on both. Apparently Lewis Carroll meant it to have no real answer, and that's a coincidence, but I digress. But as soon as you start to wonder the question out loud, you're stark raving mad, and then they're treating you like you're the mental patient instead of them. And then there's the Dormouse, lazy and constantly saying Twinkle Twinkle Little Bat and terrified of cats. Also funny characters. Then there's the White Rabbit, panicky over finding his way to the Queen's croquet game, even though he's late and late for a very important date, and has a real earworm of a song. And there are times when he's a little more sensible than the others, like at the Mad Tea Party, but he quickly mistakes Alice for his maid, Marianne, which means either she does look like Marianne, or he's just as crazy as everyone else is and just hides it better. The caterpillar is a character that has some sense of wisdom to him, sort of. But he isn't the kind that is going to share it. He's always asking questions of others and is clearly very inflated opinion of himself and very defensive of his size. But at the same time, he is very unhelpful, asks questions back as Alice is trying to explain herself, and has a bad temper. Even when he tries to finally become helpful to her by describing the mushroom, of course he has to yell right at her, "The mushroom, of course!" So, he is just as nuts as everyone else, even though in this version, as well as later ones, he's seen as being a voice of reason. Well, a source of wisdom. He's not going to give that information out unless he feels like it, and he's much more likely to tell you what you're doing wrong. The Cheshire Cat is a character that's often paired with Disney villains. I disagree. I think he's just insane like the rest of these people. And Alice has no real allies for this movie, so the Cheshire Cat doesn't really stand out that much. Sure, he gets Alice into trouble with a couple of pranks, but he's completely in things for himself. And he's always a tease, and he knows how much he's driving everyone nuts, but at the same time, he's enjoying every second of it. He acts like he wants to help, but you're better off without it. Tweedledee and Tweedledum are characters that just want to have fun and have somebody to visit them and play with, telling their story of the walrus and the carpenter, and then as soon as Alice tries to go away, they start up with another song, unaware she's no longer there. And Dodo, he's just so pompous and sure he knows the best way, even when his ideas are completely ridiculous. And he only sees himself into something, and he doesn't start to think of whether his solutions are beneficial to the other characters in the movie. Then there's the Queen of Hearts. Oh boy, she is definitely the most volatile Disney villain of all, up against maybe Hades, maybe. Now, most Disney villains are quick to anger, sure. But there's nobody quite this unstable for Disney that I can think of. Unlike other Disney villains like Maleficent or Scar or Frollo, who might be more evil. Sorry, Mother. Duita, I knew you would like that. And let's say more vicious. There's a certain sense of sweetness that is easily taken away from the Queen of Hearts. She's perfectly friendly until you annoy her, and then it's off with our heads. And she quite likes Alice for the first few minutes before some situations occur to cause her to believe Alice has humiliated her, when it's really, of course, the Cheshire Cat. But unlike other Disney villains that are completely bad throughout the whole way, she has a quick temper, but also enjoys a nice game of croquet and will gladly invite you to play and will be very sociable at first. So that gives you more reason to be wary of her instead of less. But she's also so funny when she's having a tantrum. Silence! She just is so funny. She cracks me up every time she's like screaming silence at someone. Or that all ways are her ways before turning right back and then having that little in between when she's sort of yelling but then goes back and forth. A good example being when she tells Alice proper form when addressing her. Really funny. Now into the songs. Alice in Wonderland actually has more songs than any Disney animated film, believe it or not. The problem is that they're going to be hard to talk about because a lot of these are a few lines long, such as Your Old Bible William, which is in the books but isn't really brought into this movie much, and other songs are so short that they don't really give you time to listen to them, like Twas Brillig, Jabberwocky, as it's known from the Alice in Wonderland books, as well as A-E-I-O-U. Major songs include Golden Afternoon, which is probably my favorite. It's just so beautiful and it has some great visuals that go along with it. The flowers playing and singing, and it's one of the more cheerful moments in the movie. Of course, it's ended because the flowers are obnoxious, but it's very nice while it lasts. Then there's Very Good Advice, Alice's song sang when she's given up and realizing the faults of her ways and how she really should learn to listen to her good advice and do as she should. And it's a very emotional moment. It's the one moment that's pretty much played completely seriously in the movie. Characters in Told You Would, who are probably the craziest of all the Wonderland characters, actually tear up at it, even though most of them, such as the duck-like creatures, have been snapping at her the whole time. And it's really emotional how she's given up and then all those characters fade around her, almost showing she's given up hope. Then there's In a World of My Own, which is the complete opposite of this song, which is, I could see this song being one of my anthems because I really want to find somewhere like Wonderland, as my best friend will tell you. And I just could really identify with this song. Then there's the title song, Alice in Wonderland, which, similarly to other Disney songs from this time, was sort of an intro song to really give you an idea of the movie. And it does well in those regards. Then there's the Unbirthday song. Once it gets in your head, it's never getting out. A very merry unbirthday to you, to you. Very merry unbirthday to you. Then there's other songs like that come from the books, like The Walrus and the Carpenter, which are really set to music more, and I can't really say the movie is what made them or really count them as Disney songs, but with the melody and the animation, I will say that those songs are still a highlight of the movie. Oh, and then there's Painting the Roses Red, which, similarly to Merry Merry on My Birthday, just doesn't get out of your head, and it also gives a good insight as to who the Queen of Hearts is. So, Alice in Wonderland may not have a typical plot, but it has plenty of great characters, some fun animation, and some songs that really get stuck in your head to make it a definite watch for any Disney fan or animation fan in general. If by chance you haven't seen it yet, you really need to do yourself a favor and see this movie. But of course you have. It's a Disney classic, and I'm sure you love it as much as I do. or at least respect it maybe a little more because of this review. Until then, see you all later.